Yeah.
The girls can scoot up a bit if y'all want, you know?
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على إمام الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وعلى آله أجمعين. So, for those of you, this is the first prayer / bayan given in this masjid. That's an honor, inshallah. And that's a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is accepting. So, I believe that all Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and that Allah that those who point to or lead to a good is as if they did it themselves, right? And so we take a principle from this hadith that if anyone ever does anything good in a place and they set that as a precedent, that's like the first time it's ever been done there, then any other time that it will have been done there, that person will get a reward for it. So think about it, just by being here, just for the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that God Almighty chose you to be here, means that every single prayer that takes place in this masjid, every single person that comes and sits for a talk, you will be reaping the benefit of that, inshallah. That's the idea of solidarity that you do that. So the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose you to be here for this is pretty incredible. And the fact that you get to come sit and listen to me is pretty painful, but inshallah khair. So the topic that we're going to discuss today is one that's talked about a lot in this country, and it's merely by the virtue of the fact that we have come together in this country as a bunch of different kinds of people. I mean, if you look at your MSAs at the university, for example, or your group of friends, or right now in this room, we are like the most diverse people ever, right? So, in our MSA, one of the reasons why in Knoxville we're so well funded on certain issues is because we tell the student government that no one has a more diverse body than we do, right? Our chaplain is half Irish, half Egyptian, right? Our president is Syrian. Our treasurer is, where's she from? I forget. But she's from Nigeria, actually. Okay, and then you have the Egyptian secretary, right? Which we're always kind of keeping an eye on her because political Egyptian, not sure. So we don't want her to throw up a coup. Anyway, so we're always going to keep an eye on her. And then we have, our bodies full of, Afghanis, Pakistanis, right? We have all different kinds of people. Whereas if you look at other student or youth groups or student organizations, even some other religious institutions, they're very set in their diversity. And this is part of the beauty of Islam, is that it's not a set, country or origin or ethnicity. When I speak at public schools and I talk about Islam, I'll ask them oftentimes, like, what do you think is the country that has the largest population of Muslims? Does anyone here know? Per capita? Indonesia, very good. But they're always like, Pakistan, right? Palestine? It's like, no, it's Palestine, right? But they always shout out an answer that is stereotypical, but they don't realize how diverse this group is. And so with that comes a beautiful sort of intersection, right? How many of you are not Pakistani or Desi? How many of you are Arab or maybe, South Asian? Anyone? Yeah. Do you love biryani? I love biryani, right? And then that's part of the fault of Allah, that we are able to interact with each other on that level, right? I recently went to a restaurant in Philadelphia that was Senegalese, and they had this dish called bibi. Anyone had Senegalese food before? It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says, and I know we talk about food, of course, you see I have a problem, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِندَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. What he's saying is essentially what? That I created you. First of all, he's saying, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُم, that we created you. And that alone is an honor. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing he's saying to us is that we, or I myself, we in the world, we created you. And so from that moment, if we respect God, we love God, we honor God, we think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so esteemed and we're in awe of him, nice, and we're in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then when we understand that he said, I created you, that should mean something to us. When you meet someone that you really look up to, right, for Atlanta, I don't even know who, Matt Ryan, I don't know, you meet someone that you really look up to, right, and they shook your hand, or they took a picture with you, or someone that you really admire, just that association with them would mean the world to you. And you find people talk about it all the time. people are like, hey, you know Matt Ryan? I said, yeah. Are you his cousin? No. One time, this guy that I bumped into in the street, his cousin's mom's brother, right, twice removed, got married to the neighbor of Matt Ryan's babysitter. And everyone's like, wow. It's like, why? Because we look up to somebody so much that any association, if we can find any path to that person or that thing, then we take pride in that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he says, Inna khalaqnakum, that's a direct line of connection that verily we created you. And so the human being or the person who believes in God should feel so honored that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is claiming that, right? Is claiming a connection, a relationship. Min dhakarin wa untha. He says that from a male and a female. And the reason why this is especially important is because in the idea that Islam is a sexist religion, right? A religion that chooses one or the other, is one that's a fallacy. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the get-go, from the revelation of the Quran, has never allowed that to be a discussion. He's never allowed that to be a discussion. Right? Rashi wa nabil ma'ruf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, to live with the women in your life in a good way. All these ideas that men get preferential treatment, that's what we have to understand culture versus religion. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he levels the playing field, right? And we made you from different ethnicities and tribes so that you might get to know one another. Constantly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran is saying the phrase, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, which is in plural, talking about what? That you have to be amongst a group of people. So when we talk about this idea of unity, we have to understand something first and foremost, is that the tension that we feel, have you guys ever felt tension in community for unity? Either racial or through gender, anybody? Or age? What kind of tension have you felt? Anybody? And you're like, what's the age? You're like, what is that? What was the experience?
You want me to be specific?
No, I want names.
Yeah, I mean, racial is something.
Racial's huge.
Yeah.
Racial tension's huge. I mean, there are so many people that come to me, especially people who accept Islam, converts, but it happens to everybody, where they, marriage, for example, is like a non-discussion because of what the color of their skin is, or even where their parents were born, right? That's a non-discussion. Sometimes even the access to the messages sometimes, if you don't speak a certain language, then you won't be able to understand the whole that's going on or whatever that's happening. So the reality is that these things happen, but we have to take a couple things to note here. Number one, how old is the Muslim community? Anyone know? In America. As a community. So Muslims have been here essentially since the unlawful and unrightful action of the slave trade, right? Or the slave trade, basically slavery, right? I mean, there were scholars from Africa, like Muhaddithin, who were brought here as slaves. And so Muslims have been here for a while, right? Pre-Sharia. But as a community, as an institution, we're like 60 years old. Like 60 years old. Like you guys are the first generation of Muslim people that are going to have to like history books are going to be referencing what you guys do, right? And so that's a lot of pressure, yeah, a little bit. But the reality is that whenever something is young, whenever something is in its initial stages, there's a lot of trailblazing that has to be done. And this idea of unity is one of those things. There's a lot of young people who come up to me and say, my parents don't want me to be friends with so-and-so because of where they come from. My parents keep making racial remarks or sexist remarks, and they feel uncomfortable. That tension you're feeling is a good sign. It's a sign that you know what is legitimate, what is right, and although your parents are wonderful, mashallah, they try their best, they may have been raised in a society that's not sensitive to these topics, right? But we take solace in knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to have a ultimate unity. There's a beautiful story about Salman al-Farisi, wonderful story. How many of you know Salman al-Farisi? Anybody? Okay, Salman al-Farisi is a companion of the Prophet Muhammad, and he's a Persian. For those of you, or anyone here a UGA fan? No? No one? Okay. Yeah, okay. So Persians to the Arab are like Florida fans. Okay, so it's like a serious thing, right? So like Salman al-Farisi, because he was Persian to the Arabs, was like, no, you're not from among us. You can't endear us. Salman al-Farisi was very interesting, and his journey, his path was one that was full of sincerity. So he started out as a fire worshiper, or Zoroastrian, that's what the Persian, the default religion that he was born into. And then he became Christian. There was a monastery in his city. He became Christian. Then he got kidnapped, sold into slavery, and magically ended up in Medina as a slave, okay? As a Persian slave. Now, when we say magically, obviously I mean by the color of Allah, right? But very, very coincidentally, let's say. And Salman al-Farisi kept making one prayer during the whole time, during the Christianity, during the slavery, during everything. He
he just kept asking God to show him guidance. And these monks and priests that he would meet along the way would tell him about a man named Ahmed who was going to come to this area full of palm trees, right? So Salman al-Farisi gets taken into Medina, and he works as a palm tree farmer. Well, not works, but he's essentially put into slavery as a palm tree farmer. And his hours are ridiculously difficult. I mean, it's just, there's no living condition, right? There's no living condition, no quality of life. And so Salman al-Farisi, eventually, he meets the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he was told about a certain mark on the back of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the seal of the Prophet, that he would see, and once he saw it, he became so overwhelmed and emotional, he accepted Islam, right? It's a beautiful story, right? But the reality is, because he was Persian, what kind of treatment do you think he got amongst the Arabs? Anybody? Second class, okay, that's actually a really good way of putting it. He was never at the same level as them. Even though he was Muslim, there was always some tension there. So the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, you know how they have this thing called the elephant in the room? What's the elephant in the room? Don't look at me, please. Don't look at me. What's the elephant in the room? Huh?
The issue people are ignoring.
The issue that people aren't noticing or ignoring, right? So like, if let's say like there's a hole in the wall right here, and it's like really hot, like turn up the AC, turn up the AC, turn up the fan. No one's talking about the elephant in the room or something, the issue that's over there. So the Prophet Muhammad, he didn't just address the elephant in the room. Sometimes he rode the elephant into the room, right? And made everyone very aware of what was going on. So he knew that people were treating Persians poorly. He understood that. And he knew that Salman was Persian, and that because of his Persianness, he would never be equal to the Arabs, right? Now, do we find ourselves in situations like this today?
Yes.
Where certain Muslims who have different backgrounds, whether it's financial, racial, gender, or age, do we find them being treated unequal? Yeah, we do, right? So, what do we do then? Well, let's take a look at what the Prophet ﷺ did. The Prophet ﷺ, when they were building Masjid Nabawi, they were deciding teams, right? Kind of like how you pick teams for a sport. And when you pick teams for a sport, what do you usually pick?
Best guy.
The best, and then who else? After the best.
Your friend.
Your friend, the people that you know. So, and because you play with them, you have chemistry, there's a reality to being comfortable with people. And so, if we're all from Knoxville, my team's from Knoxville, and a bunch of guys from Atlanta come, and we're going to play 5-on-5, then I'm probably going to play with the guys from Knoxville, and the Atlanta guys are going to play, and we'll, Knoxville will beat Atlanta, right? So that's just, how it works. So, I'm going to show up, right? So, but the reality is, when they were building the masjid, they were deciding who were going to be teams. Now, there's two groups of people there. Who are the two groups of people?
Knoxville and
Knoxville. Who are they? The
Muhajirin and Ansar.
Muhajirin, I'm sorry, very good. So people from Mecca, people from Medina. So they're picking teams. So who do the people from Mecca pick?
That's from Mecca.
Who?
Muhajirin.
Yeah, they picked themselves. The people from Mecca were like, all of us, right? And people from Medina were like, well, that's good because all of us. Who gets left in the middle? Salman al-Farisi. Is he from Mecca? Did the people from Medina fully accept him? Have any of you ever been the last person to get picked?
Yes.
What does that feel like? Right? I used to it, right? No. Can you imagine how painful that felt for him? That everyone has somewhere to belong except for him. I remember growing up in Chicago because my dad is a convert and my mom was Egyptian. But I was never really like Egyptian enough to really be Egyptian, right? Even though I'm from home with the Yassin and that, but the problem was that because I'm not Egyptian, they would never like invite me to their Egyptian gatherings, right? And there was a couple other friends I had who were in similar situations. And well, I'm not telling you this to get like sympathy, but lucky there were nights on Eid where we would just be sitting in the masjid, just us three. After Isha, I would just be sitting there, have nowhere to go. Because my family did this thing where we would have the typical Eid brunch and then everyone the mandatory Eid nap. You guys do that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, everyone's like 3 hours, you have to do it, right? But then everyone else had somewhere to go, and we didn't have anywhere to go. And I remember, I was okay with it, I was cool with it, whatever, once it's not me to argue or something else, fine. But the reality was, it did hurt not having somewhere to go and knowing that your friends all had somewhere else to go, right? So Salman al-Farisi is in that situation. The Prophet ﷺ recognizes it's happening right before his eyes. What does he do? Does he ignore the elephant in the room? What elephant? What? Where? Right? No. And what's interesting is that, what did the Muhajirin and Ansar do? They didn't do what we do. What we do is go, hey, you got next. Right? You got next. Just figure out where you want to get next. And we ignore the problem. You know what the believers did? And this is what Allah says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. When he says the believers are brothers, they began to fight over who would get Salman because they wanted him. Not because they didn't want him. So the Ansar were like, no, we'll take him. And the Muhajirin were like, no, we'll have him. So instead of being like how we are today, where we're like, no, you take him, put him on your bench, put him on your submit, right? They instead thought about, look at the brotherhood that they had, right? Even though they left him out in the beginning, but they recognized and they started to fight. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? He said, no. He said, Salman is from my family. You're from mine. You get to come chill with me, right? You don't get to pick on your side, come with me. And the Prophet ﷺ wasn't sitting on a throne while everyone's like, he's like, mush, build the masjid, do it. He was working with them. There's narrations talking about when everyone else was getting tired, he would roll his sleeves up more and work harder. So Salman had to work. But look at how honorable the Prophet ﷺ treated this person that everyone else in society did not embrace. So when we talk about unity, the first lesson that we learn is that it's an action. It's not a philosophy. It's not a slogan. It's not a logo on a flyer. Oh, we're unified, right? No, it's an action. It's calling those people that you normally don't hang out with to hang out with them. It's those people that you normally don't sit with at lunch, sitting with them. Those people that I was with a person in high school, and in high school I wasn't like really practicing, and I wasn't very committed to deen. But I remember there was one guy who used to sit and have lunch by himself every single day. Every single day. Just kind of a normal guy, the kind of guy that's too mature for high school, you know what I mean? Like we're all busy like planning pranks, senior pranks. Like, if we get this much Jello powder in the pool, then it'll become a Jello pool. Yeah, like we feel like geniuses. This guy was just kind of like, in his own kind of class, but he wasn't rude, but he was quiet. And I remember every single day, no one sat next to him. He was in my class. I remember our senior brunch or senior banquet. When we were there, each senior was able to go up to the microphone and sort of like give a parting message. And you know what he did? He got up, he went to the microphone with a smile on his face, subhanAllah, and he said, everyone's talking about how we're going to miss each other and the plans for the future. He goes, I just wish that one of you would have sat down and talked to me at lunch. Sounds like a scene from a movie. It literally happened in my life. And every day I regret now being a Muslim kid who was too cool to sit with that person, right? Who wasn't humble enough to make unity in action. That if someone told me like, hey, do you think you're better than other people? I would say, no, of course I don't think I'm better. Who's going to say, yeah, I think I'm better than people? But then in reality, my actions didn't reflect that. And that's why when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ, it's marfu'ah. It's in the form in the Arabic language which requires, it's the doer in the sentence. It's the one that's doing something. And so akhuwah, brotherhood, sisterhood, community, is an action. It's not a thought. So as we're sitting here, you should be thinking to yourself, what can I do leaving this gathering? What can I do that's going to bring me closer to my community members in a way that's going to break down cliques? Anyone else ever have tension with cliques? Anybody? Yeah? Anyone have any funny stories about cliques? No? Not putting a comedy song? Okay. So, cliques are terrible things, man. They're horrible things. And that's part of the reason why a couple of the brothers here, mashallah, went to the retreat that we had, the Afterlife retreat. Where were y'all, man? Come on. We had a retreat. You all know about that? What we're actually? No? Okay, never mind. We had biscuits and gravy? Anybody? No? Okay. So, at the retreat, one of the reasons why I love the retreat is because people put their guard down. Once you have to live with someone in a cabin that has like spiders and wasps, and don't you guys want to come next year? Spiders and wasps, and you're like taking showers with caterpillars, like, hey, what's up? Like staring at you. You don't, the pretension that we have with each other, where we try to like carry this image and on this person, on that, it kind of dies down a little bit, right? When you have to live in the forest for 5 days, there's no time for us to have ego, right? Because we have to survive, right? And one thing that I noticed immediately about this group that we had this year was that the first day was everyone was kind of like, I don't really know this person very well. By the second day, people were sitting at lunch together, making jokes with each other, and you saw like a little, shrimpy, nerdy kid who like can't reach the hoop. The big guy who reached the hoop picked him up, like those kind of moments, right? Where the big guy put him on his shoulders, and like, you done the basketball now, I've already done it 20 times, And it was just like those moments. What I recommend, if you're having issues with like cliques and things like that, take yourself out of situations where clickiness is easy, right? Retreats are a great example. Going out is a great example. Inviting you, bust down those doors, man. Invite people that you never would have thought would have had, you would have had over. The other issue like unity that I wanted to talk about was a sort of ethnic unity. Now, I grew up in Chicago, okay, Chicago Sharif, and I lived in Dallas. And one thing that these two places have in common is that they are full of Muslims. It's kind of like Atlanta. Atlanta has a lot of Muslims, right? What ends up happening in Atlanta, or big cities, is that people tend to default to their ethnic groups, okay? People, and it might be hard for you to recognize this, but as a half Irish, half Egyptian, American-born, confused child, right? It became super easy for me to realize this. Because like I said, when everybody else had da'wahs and I was supposed to go to, I was kind of like, where do I go, right? There's no like St. Patrick's Day parade for me right now. Like, where am I supposed to celebrate? So I noticed in Dallas, for example, we were only invited to the Bengali dinners. Why? Because my wife is Bengali. And we were only invited to the Egyptian dinner because I'm half Egyptian. There was no really like Irish Muslim community there, so I sat by myself and ate sauerkraut and corned beef. But I wasn't invited to like the Indian, the Pakistanis. I wasn't invited, and it wasn't because they didn't like me. I mean, who couldn't like me? Let's be real. But it was more about they didn't know me, and because I didn't speak their language, because they didn't really invite me places. This is a huge issue in big cities. In Knoxville, we don't have this problem. Why? Because our 8 prayers, 5,000 people total. You have to know everybody. So one thing that people like about small cities is that we're very family oriented. We always hang out with different groups, but in big cities it's tough. This happened in the time of the Prophet Muhammad. There was some racial tension amongst the Muslims. Like this wasn't like a non-Muslim thing, it was a Muslim thing. Allah was a very famous, we would consider him today to be like, we would consider to be like a Sufi. I hate using that label, but the reality is like a person who's focused on being ascetic and not worrying about the dunya and things like that. Abu Dhar was kind of like that. And you know why he was like that? Because in his previous life, he was a baller. Like in his pre-Islamic life, Abu Dhar was like, he was kind of a bandit. But he had a lot of money. He was like an OG. So when he became Muslim, he became very strict. Abu Dhar was the guy who said, that the day that we hang decorations like this in the masjid is the day that we'll see the decline of the So, but again, what do the scholars say? They say that that's we have to follow that as the way they said no. They said that's Abu Dhar being tough with himself, right? So the Sahabis sometimes they had certain personalities. So Abu Dhar one time he was having a discussion with Bilal, and Bilal was from where? Abyssinia, right? So African, dark skin complexion, and Africans at the time, right, considered by the Arabs who were in Jahiliyyah to be lesser people, right? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, amazing, again, rides the elephant into the room. What happens when Bilal becomes Muslim? He makes him mu'adhin. Mu'adhin, the guy who calls the call to prayer, is not just like an honorary title. If the imam is missing, who leads the prayer? The mu'adhin in Sharia is the mu'adhin. So if the Prophet ﷺ is out of town, who leads the prayer? Bilal is the next one in line. So the Prophet says, look, you might, in a previous community, you may have considered him less than you, but guess what? If I'm out of town, he's leading you in prayer. You can't perform your salawat without Bilal being here. Right? Incredible. Just rides the elephant into the room. So Abu Dhar is having an argument with Bilal. And out of his anger, out of his frustration, he says a comment. He says, Ya Ibn Sauda. He says, you son of a black lady, right? Meant to be like in a disparaging way of insult. So when the Prophet Muhammad hears about this, they take this to the Prophet Muhammad. The Prophet Muhammad rarely got upset. Let's put this in context. There was once a man who came into the masjid and just started peeing in the masjid. And the Prophet was like, it's okay, let him finish, right? There were times when the Prophet was praying and his grandchildren climbed on his back. And he was like, I'll give him time to finish playing, right? There were times where people would throw dead animals on his back and he'd be like, just clean it up, right? There were times when people would throw thorns under his feet and be like, I'll just pick it out. The Prophet rarely got upset. Like this was a man who was cool, calm, collected, composed. So whenever we find an instance where he gets really upset, we take note of what happened. Because that's very dangerous to come near that area, right? Yes or no? Make sense? Someone who's normally cool, when they get upset, they're like, whoa. So the Prophet Muhammad, when he hears this, the hadith says that there was a vein in his forehead that became visible. What does that mean? It said his face got red, sweat, he started some perspiration start, his brow furrowed a little bit, and a vein began to become apparent on the side of his forehead. It means he got very upset. And he went to Allah and he said, إِنَّكَ رَجُلٌ فِيكَ جَاهِلِيَّةٌ. You are a man that right now inside of you still lives ignorance. Why? Because you felt comfortable addressing somebody by the color of their skin. That became a factor for you in your relationship with that person, that the color of someone's skin, the ethnic background, where they're from, where their parents were born, that became a serious component of your relationship. That's ignorance. So think about this now. And we say these kind of things all the time. I mean, especially in the Arab community, using the word abid, right, as referring to the African American community as slaves, which is literally what the word means, or the word alu, which is a derogatory way of saying it, right? These are words or instances that the Prophet Muhammad has shown he got very upset when this privilege was being done. To the point where he began to, a vein started throbbing in his forehead, right? So when we talk about unity, we have to talk about another component of that, which is inter-ethnic unity. The reality is, for those of us who were born here or raised here, that we are American, right? And we may struggle with that. We may struggle with trying to identify our parents here, we're here, how do we balance that? I like pepsi, I like cheeseburgers, I don't really know how to balance that relationship. But we have to embrace at least one thing, and that is the fact that we cannot, in the Islamic worldview, we cannot see our ethnicity as better than somebody else's. I mean, think about it. When you're on your deathbed, which we're all going to be, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make our deaths easy, and may He make it, it's an inevitability, so we're going to have to accept it. So may He make it the best of situations. When you're on your deathbed, what do you think you're going to say? What do you think is going to come to mind? What's going to be, what does a person say in their final moments?
It's in their heart.
Number one, what's in their heart, right? Good, what else?
Regret.
Possibly regrets, okay. What else? What would a person want to say in their final moments? Shahada, okay, mashallah. Inshallah, grant us that. Maybe asking for forgiveness. These are all things that are extremely important, right? Do you think on my deathbed I'm going to talk about, the weather outside? Is it raining? You're raining, right? No, a person on their deathbed, it only makes sense. Or a person who knows they're going to pass away, let's say that. A person who knows they're going to pass away, wouldn't they try to say what's most important? What they feel like they absolutely have to say? If any of you have ever been in a situation where you've been near someone who's dying, they call you over, and the seriousness on their face, and they say come here, I have to tell you something. I'm a chaplain, so I do hospital chaplaincy as well for Muslims who are passing away. And one thing I have to tell the families is that when someone is passing away and they tell you, I have to tell you something, don't say hold on, right? Drop everything you're doing and walk over there calmly and sit with them and listen, because it's very important. And people who are passing away, they need that closure. It's very important, right? So the Prophet Muhammad, as a prophet, one of the gifts of prophethood is that they know, they are made aware of when they're going to die, and they're given a choice. Right? So the angel of death comes, the angel of death doesn't just pull the soul out and say, okay, the angel of death comes and requests it. So the Prophet Muhammad, he understands that he's going to die soon. He's giving his final khutbah. And what does he say? He says a few things, very interesting. Number one, he says, an Arab is not better than a non-Arab. Straight up. An Arab is not better than a non-Arab. And he's saying this again to a group of thousands of people, some of which are Arab, the majority of which have converted. Right? The majority of which are converts to Islam, and a large chunk of those converts are not initially Arab. And this is why they have to start teaching Arabic, right? The other thing he says, which is amazing, and he repeats it 3 times, is take care of your women. Take care of your ladies. Take care of your sisters. He's commanding the whole crowd, take care of your, because why? He's not saying it because women are like, oh, they're weaker, they need, no. Some women are stronger, dude, honestly. If you go to home run, there was one time I got decked, and I was like, flying, it was like a slip and slide. I look back, and I'm expecting to see like Dikembe Mutombo, Dwight Howard, like, I was expecting to see like, it's like a 4 foot tall Malaysian lady. She's like, move. I was like, okay, right? Apparently I was walking too slow. So it's not all about the whole weakness thing. It's about the reality. He was addressing the culture and society that abused women. He was addressing a society that used to be comfortable burying their daughters alive. So he takes that moment to say, that ignorance that you were a part of, never lose this feeling of protectiveness and of appreciation of your women, right? That's why he's saying it. So when we talk about unity, there's a couple different rounds. Let me give you guys some action items and we're going to wrap up. Because I know the worst position for a speaker to be in is in between an audience and food, right? It's the worst position. Number one, you cannot be a person that lives on unity unless you know your own values, right? You have to do a value inventory. So in my mental health program, the first day of class, they put up a thing on the projector. It says, what do you think about racists, right? What do you think about homosexual? What do you think about this? And we have to answer all these questions. And it's called a value inventory. What are your values? And you might even be surprised with yourself if you sit down and take a piece of paper and write what are the things that are most important to you? What are the things that you value? What are the things that you don't like? What are the things that you feel like are weaknesses in society? Once you know a lot more about yourself, then you will be able to be more unified with other people, okay? The second thing, you cannot be unified in community if you are disunified in the home, right? Being unified in community is not important if we can't obey our parents, right? If we can't love our parents, if we can't be nice to our siblings. Like imagine like I'm sitting here as a speaker, a teacher, or whatever, and I'm telling everyone to be nice to each other, and then I go home and I don't listen to my family. Like what is that, right? That's a little bit of hypocrisy. And so if we're going to talk about building unity amongst our friends, and the scary thing is sometimes we're lucky we treat our friends better than we treat our family. We treat our friends better than we treat our family. But at the core of it, if something terrible happened to us and they won't protect us, our family would be the first ones there. And they would be the ones who steal us the longest. You know? So we have to recognize that before it happens. We don't want to have to get into a car accident to realize how much our family means to us. We don't want to have a tragedy happen to realize how much we need our family. So unity first has to happen in the home. Do things for people before they ask you to do them. You know, if you really want to impress your parents, do things for them before they ask you to do it. That'll show them that you actually care. And that unity in the home, that love will extend to relationships. And the third thing is, Islam does not have room for cliques. If someone wants to be a true Muslim, have a good relationship with Allah, you guys want to have a good relationship with Allah? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, I hope to. You guys want to Jannah? I heard there's unlimited Chick-fil-A there. It's like, yeah, my feet, right? If you want to have a good relationship with God, then you have to get the cliques out of our lives. This means no backbiting, no slandering, no judgment. Judgment is a very, very quick path to creating cliques. There was a girl in a university that I was, nearby in Chicago, and I remember she used to come to the university without her hijab on, and then she would go to her trunk of her car, and she would get her hijab on. Normally, fortunately, it's the other way around, right? So the girl might change her outfit once they get to school, but she was actually covering her hair. So a lot of people started making fun of her, which is very strange, because it's like, well, I was making fun of someone who's clearly trying to do something to better themselves, but okay. And I remember one day we sat and we talked, and it came up a conversation, and she was really bothered because everyone used to talk about her, and she said, you know why I have to do this? And everyone's kind of like, why? And she's like, because my parents will literally physically hurt me if they see me wearing a hijab. So I have to keep it in the trunk of my car. I can't wear it in the house on the way. I have to do it once I get to school. And all the brothers and all the sisters who used to make fun of her and call her a hijabi and call her a convertible hijabi and say, your hijab doesn't even match your shoes and your belt and your nail polish and your eyeliner and then your purse. They used to make fun of all that. They felt so salty. It was like I was in a bag of pretzels. Everyone was just saying, it was the amount of just self-sadness in that room was so evident. Everyone was just like, oh my God. And she was sort of left on the outside looking in of the community because people were judging her. You know, Isa, there's a statement that's attributed to Sayyidina Isa, where he says, when you point at somebody, accusing them of something, how many fingers are pointing back at you? 3. So for every one time that we have an inclination to judge somebody or to backbite about them, then think about yourself 3 times before you think about them once. Think about yourself 3 times before you think about them once. There are plenty of situations where you would love people to give you the benefit of the doubt. Right? You guys ever been in one of those stores? Right? I'm counseling, one time I was counseling a girl, and she wasn't really up with the whole high standards thing. You know, Muslim sister, I was counseling her. At the end of the session, we get up, I pay for the coffee, and she gives me the biggest hug. She's not my wife. And she will not let go. And I'm just you know the awkward hug where you're yeah, right? Hands to the sides. And at that moment, 3 or 4 of the Islamic school teachers walk in. And they're and I'm just maybe if I close my eyes, I'll wake up in bed, right? Dude, I'm surprised they get fired. The reality is at that moment, I wanted people's understanding more than anything. You know that whole 70 excuses thing that we talk about? I was please give me 70 excuses. But when we look at other people, sometimes we forget to give them those 70 excuses. Anytime we feel that we can judge somebody, think to yourself, how many situations have I been in where I would have loved for people to give me the benefit of the doubt? I would have absolutely loved it, right? So, that's the talk on unity. I don't want us to walk away feeling like we're living a slogan. Do something today that's going to be your effort towards unity. If it means texting a friend that you haven't talked to in a while because they're not part of your friends group, do that. If it means apologizing to somebody that you have beef with, right, because you're afraid that maybe there was bad blood between you and that person, then do that. That's also unity, right? If you have a person who's a Miami Heat fan, then I'll forgive them.
I mean.
Then you don't have to apologize to them, Sean. I'm just kidding. But basically, start to build bridges, start to mend roads, right? Start to mend roads and build bridges. And there's no better time to do this than Ramadan. We ask Allah to give us Ramadan, and we also witness Ramadan. There's no better time to forgive each other than Ramadan. There's a beautiful hadith that I'll end with. And this hadith is the essence of unity. And when I talk about unity, I'm talking about happy marriages, happy friendships, happy families, happy communities. It's all based on one thing. What's that one thing? Anybody know? Huh? Okay, close. That's part of it. It's based on forgiveness. You know why? There is not a single person on this earth that will not make a mistake. Every single person will make a mistake. Our unity depends on how quickly and how fully we can forgive one another for those mistakes. And that's why the hadith says, "Man la yarham, la yurham." Whoever does not forgive will not be forgiven. So that should be a motivator for us, that if we want Allah to forgive us, the hadith has 2 meanings, by the way. That whoever does not forgive will not be forgiven. Meaning, if you don't forgive people, are people going to forgive you? Dude, people who don't forgive others, we all wait for the moment they mess up. We'll be like, ha! Right? You messed up. You're human. They're like, please forgive me. You're like, no, right? Go, walk of shame. Go, right? We wait for that moment. So the hadith is literally telling us about a psychological reality. That those people in communities who hold things over people's head, everyone's waiting for that one moment where they can hold over that person's head. So if that person becomes a forgiving personality, then will the community forgive that person? Of course. The second reality, and this is more important, is that how can we expect Allah to forgive us if we're not forgiving other people? If people come to us and say, I'm sorry, or we see in their eyes and their face they want to ask for forgiveness, how can we feel comfortable saying no and then turn to the Lord of the world and say, forgive me? Right? There's a reality between that relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us, man lam yashkur nas, lam yashkur Allah. Whoever does not thank people will not thank Allah. Allah teaches us through a lot of hadith that there's a relationship between our relationship with others and with our Lord. How we treat other people is how we can expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to treat us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to treat us the best, and Allah to treat us the best. Does anyone have any questions? Real life questions? Anyone want to know what kind of food they're making? Yeah.
So if we see someone sort of, I don't want to say higher authority, but maybe older than us or our parents or something.
Yeah.
What's a respectable way to not respecting ethnic differences or not respecting the cliques, or what's a respectful way to approach that person?
So,
Especially if it's like our parents or someone of higher authority.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
so like the parents being racist or something.
Yeah.
Oh, parents being like racist, for example, or like, yeah. I mean, so the Prophet ﷺ wrote the elephant to the room, but he always did it with wisdom, right? He never did it to make anyone feel uncomfortable. He never did it and made someone feel, especially someone that didn't know him. Like, he always made sure to do it with wisdom. And so you have to really get to know your parents. And a lot of us try to correct our parents in a relationship with our parents that's already very volatile. And so, the kid will come home from school and no one's eating meals together, no one's talking to each other. The parents have to remind the kid 6 times to take out the garbage or something. And then when something happens, the kid's like, well, don't you know that that's wrong? And the problem is, has anyone ever wanted to be corrected by someone that they didn't have a good relationship with? No. But when you're corrected by somebody that you really respect and admire and love, then that correction almost feels sweet, right? So if I have a friend that I really love and trust, and they come up to me and say hey, your shirt's not like properly. I'm like, oh, cool, thanks, man, I appreciate it. But if it's something I don't like, I'm like, no, this is what I want to do this way. you don't even know what shirts are like. You're the dumb shirt guy. We're teaching all the time, right? So your relationship with that person prior to that conversation is much more important than the conversation. Because if you have a good relationship with your parents, one where you're serving them, you're obeying them, right? You're doing everything they want from you, as much as you can do possibly before they beg you to do it, right? Then when you approach them with advice, you're not doing it because you're angry at them. They can see the love. See, so one thing that we forget sometimes is that parents are human beings too, man. Parents are human beings. They have emotions just like us. They have feelings just like us, and those feelings can get hurt. And those feelings get hurt in different ways, And so if we don't interact with our parents with that mercy and with that love, then when we come to them with advice or feedback, then we can't expect them to be all, lovey-dovey going on, although hopefully they would be anyways. So if you see your parents or someone in a leadership position or authority making a mistake, instead of correcting them at that moment, my advice would be work on your relationship with them outside of that moment, and then when another instance comes up, or outside of that situation, you can advise them in a way and they'll take it because it's sweet. Cover the medicine and sugar. Yeah.
Okay, so something that I noticed from a lot of us like to play basketball and everything like that. And whenever we go to the park or something, all the teams, they're generally divided, by race, ethnically. Like the Pakistanis will be the Pakistanis, the Arabs will be with the Arabs, and stuff like that. And sometimes this happened with me, it translates to off the court, we sometimes get to dislike each other through actions that happen on the court, And what's the best way to, is it through communication with the other teams, knowing that it's a sport, or what's the best way to not let that affect the relationship that you have with these?
And we had a rule growing up that after every game, you had to everyone had to hug each other. It's called the leaving on the court rule. So any beat, because it's inevitable. When you wrestle with somebody or when you have any sort of competition, you're gonna have that beef, right? Omar Abdelrahman and Abu Bakr Siddiq, they had beef, not anger, but they had arguments. But the reality is you have to leave it at that moment and walk away from it. So the first thing is you definitely have to talk to people about the idea of leaving all beef on the court, not taking it home with you. It's not healthy.